I was a young girl when I first learned that it's the small moments that make champions. It was 1972. I was 10 years old. I was in the third day of the Country Club Swim and Dive Championships just outside Washington, D.C. And I had my best event coming up, which at the time was the 100-foot breaststroke. And I had a main rival, and I could see her warming up in the pool. I could see the white bathing cap bobbing up and down. And I'm thinking to myself, she looks really fast. She looks kind of sleek. She looks like she wants to win. And I'm getting nervous. And so she pulls herself out of the pool and walks by me, and my father can see that I'm just really getting nervous. So he decides it's time to tell me a story. And so he says, remember your Uncle Platt? And I think, yeah, oh yeah, Uncle Platt. He finished just out of the medals in the 1908 Olympics. He was one of the finest athletes in the first 50 years of the 20th century, but he had finished just out of the medals in the 1908 Olympics. And so my father says, well, in the 1912 Olympics, he's coming up on his last jump in his best event, which was the standing high jump. And he looks at the guy who's in first place, and he says to himself, he starts a little tape, he says, well, he doesn't look any bigger than I am. He doesn't look any stronger than I am. He doesn't look any more athletic than I am. Why should he beat me? I'm going to win. And with that, my Uncle Platt went out and he leapt in the 1912 Olympics to a world record gold medal, 5 feet 4 inches. And finishing right behind him was my Uncle Ben. It was the only siblings to go 1-2 in the same Olympic event. So a couple hours later, I'm behind the blocks, my little 10-year-old skinny self in a black bathing suit with an orange stripe going down the middle, and I look at my competitor, still in the white bathing cap, and I say to myself, well, she doesn't look any taller than I am. She couldn't have trained as hard as I did. There's no reason why she should beat me, so I'm going to win. And I dove in, and I frantically swam to a league record in the 100-foot breaststroke and got a big trophy, which I brought home. And that was a big moment of triumph for me. Now, I wish I could say that everything was that easy for the rest of my teenage years. You know, you've got some talent, a little bit of success, you work hard, everything goes well. Well, that's not exactly how it worked in everything in my life. In fact, the toughest foe I faced was something that started at the age of 14 and went till the age of 22. And that was, I had a very, very serious eating disorder called bulimia. Like many other women of my age, the problem was nobody knew anyone who'd gotten better. Nobody knew how to get better. So there was this collective hopelessness, but it was my secret. Nobody knew about it. And so I had success. I was in a prep school in Washington, D.C. I did well. I went to Harvard. I got married. I looked successful. I looked like I had it all. But it was only in my darkest moment of failure and despair and depression that I found the seeds of what I needed to do to actually overcome my biggest foe. And that was what was missing for me in all those years of success. And I didn't know what that quality was that allowed me to get better first an hour at a time, then a day at a time, then a week at a time, a month at a time, a year at a time, a decade at a time, until I can stand before you today with 30 years of recovery. And I found out what that quality was when I went back to school a few years ago to get a master's degree in this new science of applied positive psychology, the science of happiness. So I'm at the University of Pennsylvania, and I meet Angela Duckworth, and I find out she's studying this quality she defines as grit, passion, and perseverance in pursuit of long-term goals. And I said to myself, that's what I developed. That was the piece that was missing. I had success, but I didn't have grit. And ironically, it took my toughest opponent to find out what I needed to do to get it. Now, grit is the word of the year. You hear it everywhere. You hear it in commencement speeches. You hear it in the sports pages. You see it on ESPN. You see it in the State of the Union. Everyone's talking about grit. Why? Because it is such an exciting concept. And we now know how to measure it thanks to Angela Duckworth and the grit scale. And here are just a few of the things that she's discovered that her grit scale can measure. The first is that it now trumps all measurements of who succeeds at West Point, a horribly difficult environment. But your grit score now predicts who survives at West Point. It also predicts who finals at the National Spelling Bee at the age of 12. So as young as 12, the grit scale is a predictor of who's tough enough not to be a quitter. And then finally, it also predicts who will finish and teach for America, a 2-year notoriously difficult environment. Where a lot of people just don't have what it takes to be put in these tough schools, who aren't even trained as teachers. And so here's the problem. We all need grit, but we just don't know how to get tougher, and that's the problem. And the reason why is we're just coming up on the end of what's called the self-esteem movement, which has been a horrible failure, because the only thing this self-esteem movement did was tell kids they were great just because they existed, not because they did anything. They were just, everyone's a winner. Or as the dodo bird says, all have won and all must have prizes. And the only thing the self-esteem movement did create, ironically, is narcissists and sociopaths. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've seen as a result of the self-esteem movement. Now, this may look like a really lovely playground to all of you, a sweet little place where we can all take people. Well, this to me is a tragedy. This is my neighborhood park. This is what it now looks like as of 3 days ago. And all American parks look like this. We have dumbed down all of the playgrounds in the United States. So if you fall onto a pillow of wood chips. Nobody skins their knees. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody falls. You know, and so psychologists say that we have this generation of children who are too anxious to climb a tree. They're afraid to take risks. They're afraid to fall. And if they do, their parents are going to run up behind them and file a lawsuit. When I was a child, there was a swing that was so high I thought I could swing up to the sky. Same thing with the slide. I'd go down the slide, and you know what? I sometimes skinned my knee because there was gravel, but that doesn't exist anymore. So the dumbing down of playgrounds has been a huge problem. We also have the slowest generation of all time. The most common race now is what's called the color run. And guess what? No one gets a time because it doesn't matter because everyone's a winner. And so all these American racing officials are saying we don't even have competitions anymore. We have parades, which is true. So the average American male marathon runner now is 44 minutes slower than the average man in previous generations. They see this for women, they see it in swimming, but this is the color run. By the way, I just found out that the Tough Mudders don't even have times associated with them. People don't get times. And guess what? Everybody knows there's winners and losers, but not this generation. And we have now higher education system where everyone gets an A. In fact, it is so inflated that it's called the ordinary A. In the 1960s, everybody got a C. That was the average grade. And now it's an A. So when you go to interview for a job, nobody even knows what your GPA means. And so this culture of mediocrity has taken over the country. Let me tell you about a few things I've observed just in raising my own 3 children in the Washington area. I've got plenty of stories about what I've seen my kids, achieve and not achieve and what they've been rewarded for. Well, the first one is called the fun run. So my kids' elementary school used to have a fun run. So when my oldest son went through, I remember he trained for it, he ran a lot, he looked forward to it. And I have to tell you, a lot of the kids look forward to it. Not everybody, because not everyone's a good runner, and not everybody wanted to really exhaust themselves. But I remember the boys would sit around in my kitchen, they'd talk about it, so there was a fun run that year. By the time my 3rd child went through the elementary school, it had been eliminated. And I asked, what happened to the fun run? And I was told, well, the parents were complaining because their children's feelings were hurt, that they weren't winning. And so they got rid of it. That's just one story. Now, a story that really sticks with me is a story of we joined a little summer swim team just outside Washington called Montgomery Square. A little hole in the ground, like a concrete deck and a little pool. But the minute we joined, we were told that they had this extraordinary legacy. An Olympic gold medalist, a world champion, another person who had gotten 7th in the Olympics, a 4-time NCAA winner. And so my husband and I look around and we go, well, where's the record board? And a parent said to us with a straight face, well, we hid the record board because we're afraid the children are going to get discouraged and give up. So I was elected the A-Rep. The first thing I did was I commissioned the largest record board ever made for summer swim team swimming. In fact, that's what I was told. So this is the record board, and I embedded the pictures of these amazing swimmers. I brought them back from the Cayman Islands, from everywhere that they lived, and we had a party. And we celebrated it, and the kids loved it. And this young man in particular, he would pull a chair up in front of the record board, and he would stare at it, and he fixated on this one time, the 100-meter backstroke. And he would sit there and sit there and sit there and look at it. And he said to himself, I think I can win. I think I can break that. And so one memorable Saturday morning, I'll never forget, there were 7 timers on his lane. Everybody's standing up. I'm the announcer, so I'm announcing what's happening. And I say, this young man is going to try to break the record. And so we're all screaming, and you know what? He broke the record by 1/10 of a second. And he said to me later, Mrs. Miller, thank you so much for getting that record board, because if you hadn't gotten that record board, I wouldn't have even known what to shoot for. And other records got broken, by the way. So that's just from my own life that I have seen this issue of everyone's a winner.